Hello, and welcome to Private Ocean's webinar on a topic that I know is near and dear to many of us as we navigate through these really unprecedented times. One of the benefits of our job is working with our amazing, thoughtful clients. Over the past few weeks, my colleagues and I have spoken to many of you, and the subject of giving back to your communities has come up. We wanted to take a little time today and share some of the information that we've gathered, and of course, we welcome your feedback and questions. Joining me today are Lisa Peters, my colleague in Seattle, and Steve Branton from our San Francisco office. And I'm Julie Bach. We're all lead advisors at Private Ocean. Lisa has a particular interest in philanthropy, and we're all involved in nonprofits in our community. So let's get started by addressing some of the common questions we're receiving from people. Those questions include things like, how do I help my local community? Where do I start? How can I make the most positive impact? And what can I do beyond donations and volunteering? So for most of us, what comes to the top of our minds first are our first responders. And we know that they're all working really hard and going through a lot of challenges right now. So we've gathered some ways that we feel would be a good support for them. And one of them is blood donations. Right now, blood donations have gone down pretty dramatically because of our social distancing measures, but we can actually still donate blood locally through the local Seattle organization is Bloodworks, or nationally through the American Red Cross Association. It's important to do this by appointment only, but it's also important to consider doing it as blood donations have really declined. We can also donate to our local hospitals. Most of our hospitals have foundations that will allow you to direct your donation directly to the COVID-19 response. And in the Puget Sound area, two of the larger hospital systems, of course, are the University of Washington Medicine, or UW Medicine, and then also the Swedish medical system. Both of those have foundations you can donate directly to. Steve, how about in the Bay Area?
Similar story to Seattle. The Bay Area hospitals, Kaiser, UCSF, Sutter, and Stanford, what they really need is unopened medical supplies, swabs, masks that are medical grade, wipes, hand sanitizer. Even the state has a website. I think we've included that in our blog. Is accepting donations of these items. But if you're like most people, you don't have medical supplies sitting around the house that you can give. You can, as you suggested, check with your local hospital about the COVID-19 specific fund. Or when I checked with my hospital, Kaiser, they recommended a national organization called Direct Relief. And what Direct Relief does is they actually pull together money and then they purchase personal protective equipment, which they then supply to first responders in the field. Then I think beyond giving money, you can consider contacting your hospital, your local hospital directly. If you'd like to, provide food, maybe send over lunch or dinner or flowers to the first responders. I know that in San Rafael and San Francisco, we sent lunch over to Marin General Hospital, and we got a nice photo back, and we think everyone was smiling, but we couldn't see under all the protective equipment.
Great. And then lastly, of course, is the most important thing we can do, which is drive down the demand for their services. And if we adhere to the CDC guidelines to keeping ourselves and our families healthy, then that hopefully will drive down the demand for our first responder services.
Well, we can go on and talk more about what we might do in our community. We've heard from people that they'd really like to support their community right now. And with so many businesses shuttering and the rate of employment surging so much, there's really a lot we can do to help the unemployed. One area of concern is just food insecurity right now. And the best way to address that is to look to your local food bank. Here in Seattle, we have Food Lifeline, which is essentially a food bank of food banks. They accept donations of of funds and food and will accept volunteers. And Northwest Harvest has a reach all throughout our state. Locally, just in a nearby neighborhood, the Ballard Food Bank is a great organization to consider looking into.
Yeah, and here in the Bay Area, all the food banks, it's been in the news a lot. SF Marin Food Bank, the Berkeley Food Pantry, the Alameda Food Bank, and then the organizations that also deliver food, Meals on Wheels, um, Project Open Hand, and then of course the ones that are geared toward the homeless, like St. Anthony's, are seeing this incredible surge in the need for food at the same time as they're seeing their volunteer numbers drop because in many cases a number of their volunteers, the elderly, are being asked to stay at home, and so you're just seeing this sort of perfect storm that's hitting these organizations. So obviously, if you can volunteer and it's safe for you to do that, then they need help. They also need food and they need money.
Absolutely. And then there's all the students who have been receiving, those that have needed help with lunches and dinners might receive those services while they're going to school. And many of our school systems have stepped up to try to get those needed food items to students while they're not in school. We've had experience here in the Puget Sound with the Backpack Brigade. They provide backpacks of meals for Seattle students for the weekend. What's going on in your community there, Steve?
Well, because kids are at home with parents, I think if you're giving to food banks, then you are helping to feed children too. But if you wanted to specifically target your giving for children, you can donate to your local school district here in the Bay Area as well. I know San Francisco, the Unified School District, their Department of Student Nutrition Services and Spark SF are basically providing grab and go meals at sites around the city. And sometimes these grab and go meals provided by the school districts are at the same places as the food banks are also delivering food. So you kind of have this, parents and kids all at the same time getting food. And the idea is that we don't want these children to lose access to food while the schools are closed.
Absolutely. Another really hard hit community is our food servers. We've seen initiatives pop up to help. Locally here is one is called the Plate Fund, which was initiated by the Howard Schultz Family Foundation along with a local restaurant alliance. And a donation here could help laid off servers and staff who can apply for cash assistance. And then anecdotally, we're seeing groups of neighbors and colleagues pool money together to pay for meals at restaurants and cafes to feed the homeless, which is really fantastic. And I don't know, Steve, have you encountered the virtual tip jar?
That was news to me. I know Seattle has one. I did take a look at the one locally, and in fact, a lot of the restaurants that I like to go to are showing up in the tip jar. There's people's names, so if you recognize a server, you can help them during this time where while there's money in the stimulus package for to increase the unemployment. A lot of people it's being reported widely that they're not getting it yet, and so there's this period where anything can help. And so, yeah, doing the tip jar, and then actually a lot of the restaurants themselves have GoFundMe sites set up. So if you have a favorite restaurant, take a look at their website and see if there's a way that you can provide some direct temporary.
Yeah, that's fantastic. The other area that concerns us are the people in the arts. And in Washington State, a well-established nonprofit called the Artist Trust is galvanizing individuals and foundations and government agencies to provide immediate assistance to this hard-hit community. Amazingly, on March 20th, only a week after we shut down Washington State, they started to fund artists, and through April 10th, they've distributed over $250,000 to artists in the state. And then, of course, we know that many of our favorite arts organizations, the opera, ballet, the symphony, they're in some serious trouble as well. So if you're a supporter, I know that those funds are needed there as well. One of the areas I like to think about when I'm considering a donation is a local community foundation. And one of the reasons is that the scope of who they deal with is so broad. A community foundation will meet with nonprofits. They'll grant money to them. They'll monitor and support them in how they serve the community. And so they're in the best position to really know where the greatest needs are. And so here in Seattle, there's the Seattle Foundation, which has a COVID-19 response fund. They've already sent out funds to the most vulnerable people in our area. And I want to just give a mention to two others that are in areas that have less resources, and that's the community of North Central Washington and the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation. And then in Marin County, I noticed that there's a community foundation that's very active right now. I think they've raised $1 million to help the needs of the county there too.
Yeah, absolutely, Lisa. I mean, the Marin County Foundation, SF Foundation, the East Bay Foundation. One of the benefits about the donating for the COVID-19 response to the foundation is they have their boots on the ground. They know the organizations that need help, where the need is the most urgent. And so I think if you don't necessarily know specifically who you'd like to give to, then looking to a foundation for that expertise can be a good thing to do as well.
Exactly. And then I guess the last bullet point here is something I think everyone's probably already thought of, is that gift cards can be a godsend to those service providers who aren't able to work. So a restaurant, a landscape company, any number of different businesses that are furloughed right now could be so helpful.
And lastly, just thinking about things that don't necessarily require donation. The psychologists tell us that when you're going through a stressful time, a way to help reduce your stress is to help others. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to do that through money, but you can do it through other ways. You can show gratitude to an essential worker, like a grocery store or drugstore, or even hospital staff. If you have them in your neighborhood, you can make them a handmade card. Maybe if your flowers are blooming in your yard now because spring has arrived, you're leaving flowers, or even a meal, a homemade meal for one of your neighbors who are essential workers. Another thing to do is thinking about those people that may not be able to get out, the elderly and the vulnerable, and checking in on them to see if there's anything you could do to help. And I know Steve has a great specific example of this in the Bay Area.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of an unprecedented time where we have a large segments of our population who are actually saying don't leave the house. You can sign up in the Bay Area. There's a couple of organizations. The one in Oakland is called Risk Match, and then in San Francisco we have SF Community Support, and then there's Shanti and Open House. But these organizations, what they can do, they can help match you with an elderly person or someone with a compromised immune system. And once you're approved, there's lots of opportunities where you can help someone who has been advised essentially stay indoors for this indefined amount of time. You can run errands, pick up pharmacy orders, or in some instances even walk their dog for Shanti. And I know that I myself, I'm still waiting to pass Shanti's background check. But assuming that I do, I'm looking forward to the opportunity to walk someone's dog.
Kudos, Steve.
That's great. That is great. And then lastly, just thinking about ways to cheer people up as you're out in your neighborhood. One thing you could do is get some sidewalk chalk and paint or draw some uplifting pictures and words of encouragement there. I know in our neighborhood, I'm seeing that a lot as I walk through my neighborhood. I also had something kind of neat happen in that I had a letter in my mailbox from a neighbor that I'd not met before, and she was reaching out to see if there was anyone elderly or vulnerable here. And while my family didn't need that, I did reach out to her just to tell her how much I thought her gesture was so thoughtful. And she and I now have connected, and we plan to meet up after the virus is has after we've gone through all of this. So just making sidewalk art. You don't have to be Picasso. Just get something out there really helps to lift people's spirits. And then Lisa, you were also mentioning the bear hunts that you're seeing.
Yeah, I read about it was happening in the Bay Area. I haven't seen it here in Seattle.
Oh, I've actually seen that on my walks around where people will put bears or even other stuffed animals in their windows as a way to help engage kids during this time as they go on bear hunts. And most recently, I think it's beginning to evolve. And most recently, I'm starting to see people dress up their bears. So it's been fun to notice that.
Yeah, they definitely have the bear hunts here, and not just for kids either. Adults can look for the bears too.
Right.
Yeah, many of us still have stuffed animals up in our bedrooms.
Right.
So finally, the other considerations, as we mentioned before, if you're wondering what's the best, most tax efficient way to give to an organization, check with your financial advisor or your tax preparer. I think, if you do your giving and you stretch it out over the course of an entire year, consider ramping it up because organizations really need money now. And, they've had to cancel fundraisers. They've had to cancel programs that generate revenue for them. So in some instances, they're having a hard time staying open. And so, go ahead and changing up your plan and maybe instead of stretching it out over the course of the entire year, funneling those donations over the next 3 to 6 months is something that you might want to consider. I think, Lisa, you also had kind of a more high level thought about charitable giving right now.
Yeah, well, I know we discuss with our clients their charitable plans, and they evolve over time. And I think a great exercise is to look back at the kind of giving you've done in the past and rate it as to how much joy it's given you. And if there are things you've done in the past where, while you don't regret them, don't give you the same spark of joy, maybe this is the time to relook at everything and revamp and reconsider what your priorities are in this area. Lastly, we would just like to encourage you, if you take some of these steps, to let others know on social media and spread the good word.
So thanks everyone for joining us. We know there are a lot of really caring people in the private ocean client community, and we just wanted to gather some of our thoughts together and share those with you. But if you'd like to learn more about some of the, or more specifically about the organizations that we've mentioned, take a look at our website and that we have posted here, and you'll be able to find links to most of the organizations that we talked about. Thanks again for joining us. Stay well and stay healthy.